Okay, so there's the quotes from Bernstein again. Focus of change, inter-individual, intergroup. The cognitive changes. Social change. And the other quote, focus of the pedagogy, transmission, explicit ordering of the discourse, like when I was building that spiral curriculum of genres earlier. Here we go. Implicit facilitating practice. It's not that there isn't actually a sequence there, but it's implicit. Reasoning about pedagogy, it's crucial to be explicit about each quadrant's informing theories and to set each debate in its particular cultural context. Australia in the 70s, for example, had this debate, and the progressivists won. Beginning in kindergarten, moving through primary school, into the art subjects in secondary school, and even into English, some subjects in university became hegemonic. So when we began, 1980, all the curriculum pedagogy, progressivist, radically progressivist. Look at the science curriculum, learning to write in science, top of the list, poetry, story writing. Unbelievable nonsense. That's what it's done. In the 80s, heroes, challenging the process writing and whole language programs. And in the 90s, the critical theorist people that we worked with to dislodge the progressivists decided they were really worried about us because they viewed what we were doing as too conservative. They didn't want to be teaching the genres and being critical at the end. They wanted to be critical from the beginning. In my experience of students learning is the last thing they want to do when they're learning grammar or anything is to think that there's two ways of doing something. They want to know one, tell me which one, and then maybe later on. And then things seemed to quiet down in the knots. Maybe that's a good thing in some ways, a bad thing in other ways. But the violent contestation seems to be subdued. And where are you at, I could ask. What are you going to do? Where are you going? Every context is different. Okay, so China, for example, very traditional teaching at this stage, and then as part of their general capitalist explosion, flirting with American progressivism into their education system. And I'm going, don't do that, stop. You've already given Mao turning in his grave so many times, don't do that. But we'll see what happens. Changing curriculum and pedagogy is, of course, a huge challenge, institutionally. It's very hard starting from the bottom, locally, in one or another school or a particular district, and then getting it spread across the country. Or equally hard is for a government, say in Indonesia, to decide we're going to have a genre-based literacy program for English, and now they're deciding to do it for Indonesian. And, you know, there's no resources, there's not enough linguists, there's nowhere near enough educational linguists to support a program for 250 million people. It's very challenging. But teachers have changed radically before. I take heart from the success of progressivism because it goes completely against nature. It goes completely against the predisposition to teach that we're genetically wired with. Okay? So progressivism really challenged this. So much so that I go to TESOL and I go to the e-learning conferences, and that's still the dominant voice that I hear. But when we were working, I mean, we had materials of this kind, process writing. One of my greatest temptations was to tell children what and how to write. I had to literally bite my tongue and remember that children can think for themselves. And here we overheard we're observing a class, and the teacher thinks that we're process writing people because all consultants and researchers are process writing people. And she tells one of the kids something about the writing, how to improve the writing, and she goes, looks at us worried and goes, I know I'm not supposed to tell them anything, but after all, I am their teacher. Halliday has a good term for this, benevolent inertia. Okay? You make the classroom a really nice place to fail. Okay, winding down. So, taking Bernstein's ideas into account, over the decades, people have naturally tried to stop us. I think middle-class people, next to consciously, realize that we're squandering their children's inheritance. All a middle-class person can really do is give their children a good education and give them control of those school genres to get them through life. And I think they realize that we're taking that, that's meant to be specialized for their children only, and spreading it. And that the violence of the reaction to what we're doing comes partly from that. So in the 80s, I mean, the opposition comes in different forms. In the 80s, we're destroying the students' creativity. If we teach them genres, they won't be able to write creatively. And if you actually look, as we did, and studied carefully the writing produced in the whole language programs, it's, 1 or 2 genres, story genres, only, from K to 7 through the whole primary school. Hardly any factual writing, a little bit by boys, no preparation for secondary school, no responsibility for bureaucratic administrative genres in the community, nothing creative about it. It gives an incredibly homogeneous product. The 90s, the worry that we would turn students into middle-class Anglo patriarchs if we teach them the genres of power. The knots, the opposition was that texts, we have to realize texts are multimodal. Now, writing is not that important anymore. It's a visual culture. And this decade, I think in the post-colonial world, it'll be something to do with identity, that we're homogenizing people's identity by teaching them genres. So my response to this is really boring. I have the same response every time. So in the 80s, the response is, but creativity depends on mastery of the genre. Look at sport, look at music, look at art. You master the genre, then you be creative. Look at anyone. Critique depends on mastery of the genres of critique. Listen to those post-structuralists criticizing us and think, how did they learn that? And mastery of what you're critiquing. Managing multimodality depends on mastery of multimodal genres. And I'll be boring again this decade, because we cannot not mean genres. And especially in the 90s, I like to throw Bakhtin back at them, because the cultural studies people are all coming from Bakhtin. The better our command of genres, the more freely we employ them. The more fully and clearly we reveal our own individuality in them. The more flexibly and precisely we reflect the unrepeatable situation of communication. In a word, the more perfectly we implement our free speech plan, the better our command of the genres. It's its condition. So I'll just end with this little anecdote. A couple of years ago, a father arrived home to find a message waiting for him on his children's whiteboard. That's the message there. Children have signed the message here, the 4 children. The trampoline is no longer a safe play area. They want the trampoline repaired or replaced. There's a little argument here I'll show you in a moment about the trampoline. Here's some of the loose springs that are flying out. There's the trampoline annotated with various problems. So, multimodal argument, genre. Our issue is the trampoline is no longer a safe area to play. Our trampoline is growing too old and falling apart. Kinza has already been injured because of it, and so has Omar. Kieran and Azar have come very close to being injured as well. The reason it's no longer a safe place to play is that 2 springs have already flown into the air when we jumped, narrowly missing our heads. We have some evidence on the bottom of the board, and further evidence may be found in the Our solution is to buy new springs, or even better, buy a new trampoline. Signed. Wonderful children. They're in a genre-based literacy program at Belmore Public School, typical school that we started with, 92% non-English speaking background, mainly Arabic and a mix of others. And the children are from a Urdu-speaking family, although 2 older children speak a bit of Urdu, but the family interacts mainly in English in an Australian context. And when the text was written, older girl Kieran, 12, she was the scribe. She took the role of the teacher. Students. Azar 9, Omar 7, Kinza 5. There's their argument. Not a canonical exposition structure, but recontextualized for their purpose here. And they felt the argument would be more powerful if each of the children contributed, so Kieran, who was scribing, made sure there were contributions from Azar and Kinza and Omar in the text, which are highlighted, and she can point them out to me where they were. And they felt that the written text would be more powerful and have more effect on the father than just talking to him and him being tired and busy and telling them to go away. And so it's not only the argumentative text that they've taken and recontextualized, but Kieran has recontextualized the pedagogy as the eldest sibling, jointly constructing this text with her siblings for presentation to the father. I got a new trampoline. The year after writing this, Kieran went to secondary school, where we had never managed to change things. And I thought her comment when I was chatting to her about this was interesting. We're on our own now. I've had students coming back from secondary school to their primary school teacher to get help with writing tasks. We have to write a book report. What is a book report? What? Put their hand up. What genre, miss? Doesn't make any sense to the secondary school teacher, all these things. Okay, so Kieran's now stranded. Has to learn all the new genres of secondary school on her own in an implicit facilitating practice. When there's so much more to teach and learn. Okay, so the main things I would highlight from what I'm saying today, the complementarity of our dispositions to teach and learn. The notion that talk about language is part of language learning in the home, so quite natural that would be part of language learning in school as well. We need, if we're going to make learning, teaching transitive, to have a pedagogy designed to give access democratically to what it is we're trying to teach. And think about our teaching learning cycles. Introduce them up to around the year 2000. I haven't introduced you to the new variations that we're developing currently. So I'll just end with this quote of Bernstein's. Many of his passages were very inspiring for us and very moving. Biases in the form, content, access, and opportunities of education have consequences not only for the economy. These biases can reach down to drain the very springs of affirmation, motivation, and imagination. In this way, such biases can become, and often are, an economic and cultural threat to democracy. So if you want to read a little bit more about what I'm talking about, David Rose and I finally got our act together and wrote up the Sydney School Curriculum Pedagogy Ideas into this book, Learning to Write, Reading to Learn. And if you want that articulated by people who are educational linguists rather than linguists, David's an educational linguist, I'm a linguist, but there's also a very good book, a new edition of an old book called Text-Based Syllabus Design by Susan Fees, which was very successful, and they've published a new book as well. So these would be the two canonical sources that you could use now. Okay, thank you very much.